Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this video is a total redo of my review on Superman Returns because I went on, kind of like a yab session, but kept messing up throughout the entire video as it was 40 minutes long. Plus, I didn't write any notes on Letterboxd, as sometimes taking notes helps me when I cover reviews. Now, 25% of the time, I can pull off making a review without having to take notes. For example, Jurassic World Rebirth, as I didn't need notes for that video. But 75% of the time, I do need notes, because they just sometimes help me out on talking about certain topics for when I cover reviews on movies or TV shows. Plus, I definitely needed to write down my thoughts on Letterboxd on everything I couldn't stop thinking about with Superman Returns as I rewatched that movie today. And another thing about my thoughts with Superman Returns, so, I kid you not, 7 months ago, the last time I rewatched this movie was before we had gotten the teaser trailer for James Gunn's Superman. And I had some minor issues with that movie, but like gave that like a solid 9 out of 10. And now, 7 months later, as I rewatched the movie today, I meant to rewatch it before I went to go see James Gunn's Superman, along with making this video. I meant to make this review before I went to go see the movie last night at the early access screening. And I kid you not, this time I didn't find any issues, and I just found myself praising this movie, as I now have a slight change of opinion on Superman Returns. So I don't know how the heck all of a sudden I have a slight change of opinion on the movie. Could it be I had just watched a new Superman movie? Or probably because I talked about this movie sometimes with my friend Ryan, as he's a massive Superman fan. But this movie is also one of his childhood and adult favorites. I don't know, I'm just shocked that I now have like a slight change of opinion on this movie. But with that being said, hello everyone, welcome back to another movie review on the channel. So like I said, I meant to have this video out before I went to go see Superman last night. And I would say this would be the end of my review series for the Superman films, but I have 3 more after this, and that would be my DCEU reviews, where I review every single movie we've gotten in the DCEU, since I've only reviewed Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, and Zack Snyder's Justice League as a re-review. And the other reason I'm reviewing those movies is because Superman is the start for the new DCU, and I kind of wanted to take a look back at the old DC universe that is now dead, been discontinued. But before I talk about my thoughts on Superman Returns, as I wrote like a 22 paragraph review on Letterboxd, I'm gonna tell y'all a kind of an interesting but mainly funny story I have about Superman Returns that I would say would be my experience with this movie. And I know I mentioned this in my How to Train Your Dragon Trilogy review that I can only remember memories that go all the way back to 2010. I won't be able to remember stuff from 2006 to 9. But there's a memory I remember that has to do with Superman Returns. And I might not remember this well because I'm kind of having like an argument with my mom on how she remembers this the way I remember this. As in, she's telling me that this happened while I'm telling her a completely different thing, as that's not how I remember it. Where her story is that apparently we were playing hide and seek and me and Dee had left the house because my dad forgot to turn on the alarm on the backyard door. But the way I remember this was that my mom was asleep. At least I think. Also, I think me and Dee were home alone with our mom while our dad was at work, since he's in the Air Force. But I'm gonna assume this had to have been 2011, or actually, no. I'm gonna say that this was probably 2010. Hell, there's a good chance this could have been 2009. I don't know. I just know that I was like very young. I was a young little baby by the time I was doing this. And what was it I was doing? Oh, I was sent on a mission to go get myself a movie that caught my eye in the movie aisle at Walmart, and that was Superman Returns. And my partner in crime that was coming along with me would be my little brother D'Alessandro. So he helped me grab the chair as I went to disable the alarm, and I was thinking that I disabled it, but better context, I'm pretty sure it was already disabled from my dad. And just a quick disclaimer, I could be totally wrong with what really happened, because this is just how I remember this. But yeah, I'm thinking I disabled the alarm, me and my brother go outside in the backyard, and we're out in the streets. And by streets, I mean the neighborhood, specifically. And we went into somebody's random trampoline, and I remember going underneath somebody's car, as I was curious to know if I was able to go underneath somebody's car. Which sounds like a pretty bad idea, I know. But my excuse? I was a kid at the time. And sometimes kids can be stupid. Okay, maybe that's not a great thing to say, but still, you get what I'm trying to say. But yeah, me and my brother were then heading out to Walmart, which, by the way, I didn't know where I was going. The fact I had confidence thinking I would be able to get there and take the movie when I didn't know I needed to have money on me to purchase an item. Man, I must have been one dumbass kid. But we didn't get too far because there's these, I would want to say teenagers. These were guys in black clothing that were just hanging out. But for better context, I think these were security guards because where we were at in the neighborhood, this was on base since my dad was in the Air Force and still is. These guys would not let us through as they were asking where was our mom or dad at. And for about a good 10 minutes, I think, I see my mom on her bike with a cart in the back that me and my brother would sit in to take a nap if she were to go on a bike ride. And once she picked us up, we pretty much got in trouble from both our parents. But that's how I remember trying to go to Walmart to get the Superman Returns movie because that just caught my eye and I wanted to get my hands on it. But like I said earlier, there was no way I could have walked out of the store with that in my possession because, for starters, that would be stealing, and second, I didn't know I needed to have money to purchase something. But with that out of the way, let's talk about my thoughts on Superman Returns that will soon be 20 years old, come by next year. And here's a realization I had this morning when I was rewatching the movie. I think I know how I ended up becoming a Superman fan. It was because of this movie. Sure, I mentioned in my quadruple review that I have seen the Christopher Reeves films when I was a little kid thanks to my dad, and that I remember watching Superman 4: The Quest of Peace a lot, as I was kind of obsessed with that movie, similar to how I was obsessed with Spider-Man 3. But there is something different about this movie that I don't know how to explain, that I have a special place for in my heart. And now I know why. I think this was my introduction to Superman. I think this is how I became a Superman fan, and it was because of this movie that came out 2 months after I was born. Of course, I didn't watch it by the time this was in theaters because I was 2 months old, so I had to have watched it at least a year later of its release. But still, it all makes sense now. I think this movie is how I became a fan of Superman. Now, I could be wrong in that the Christopher Reeve films were the ones that made me a fan of Superman. Yeah, I like those movies growing up, but this one is my personal favorite for a reason. Of course, I grew up watching the original films as a kid, but before I had Henry Cavill as Superman, I had Brandon Routh as my Superman growing up. I loved this movie so much when I was a kid, and years later, I still do, and think it's an underrated Superman movie. Now, I'm shocked to have a 180 on this movie because 7 months ago, I was rewatching this film and was having some slight issues with its pacing or certain scenes that felt maybe boring to me, but now all of a sudden I have a slight change of opinion about it after seeing the new Superman movie, as I'm no longer finding anything to nitpick about in this film, as I'm finding myself praising Superman Returns. There's a lot I want to discuss about this movie, so I'll start off with the casting. I like each casting for Superman, Lois, Lex Luthor, even Jimmy Olsen. But here's something I totally forgot to mention about. So, as I criticize a lot about Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor in the DCEU with Batman vs. Superman, and how I'm not entirely a fan of the Lex Luthor from the original films, I had mentioned that so far out of all the adaptations I've seen in live action, the one that I liked the most was the Lex Luthor from Smallville, as I'm still watching that right now for the first time. I can't believe I forgot about this Lex Luthor from this movie. I think this movie had my favorite Lex Luthor casting, as he was better than the one from the original films, especially the DCEU's version. But it's crazy we don't get a lot of Jimmy Olsen in DC media, especially in the DCEU when Zack Snyder decided to kill him off. That's one thing I will agree with everybody, because what the hell, Zack Snyder? But out of all the Jimmy Olsens I've seen in live action or even animation form, this movie's version of Jimmy Olsen has to be my personal favorite, while I got the DCU's version at second place. But I really love the casting for Superman. This guy was my Superman growing up as a kid before I moved on to Henry Cavill, who would sadly only last a decade as Superman thanks to Warner Brothers doing him dirty. But he did a good job for me, as he's pretty much a recast for Christopher Reeves, and sadly he passed away 2 years before the movie's release. Since this movie is supposed to be set in the Christopher Reeves Superman timeline and ignores Superman 3 and 4, as I looked this up 7 months ago, I'm happy with that, because not only do I think this movie is better than the last two stinkers, I like how we have a Superman trilogy with the original to Superman 2 to Superman Returns. Now, would I have liked to have gotten a sequel to this? Oh, hell yes! It's such a shame that this movie didn't get a sequel, but I will admit, there are times in this movie where I was thinking to myself, okay, there is certain stuff in here that give off the vibe of this being like almost a total reboot, but this is technically still supposed to be like a sequel to Superman 2 in the Christopher Reeve Superman timeline, as this movie takes place 5 years later after the events of Superman 2. Now, since this movie came out in 2006, the year I was born in, the same year we had gotten X-Men The Last Stand, I would have liked it if Bryan Singer had directed that movie since he directed the first two, but since he was too busy directing Superman, I'll say this, I liked how he directed this movie. Yeah, I dug X-Men. Yes, X2 is better than the first movie. While I would consider X-Men Days of Future Past the best he's made, but this one's probably my favorite from him. I also liked seeing James Martin in this movie, which also explains why he was barely in X-Men 3, because he was too busy filming scenes in Superman Returns as Lois' boyfriend, since she moved on from Supes and was kind of pissed off how he left without saying goodbye, but also ended up becoming a mom. Bringing us to Jason White, who was later revealed to be none other than Superman's son, thanks to him pushing a piano to save his mother while also killing one of Lex Luthor's goons in the process. I didn't understand this as a kid, but now being older, holy crap, this is such a cool twist that I actually like in this film. Also, I am never gonna forget how Lex Luthor had realized that, oh shit, this kid is Superman's son. We gotta get the f out of here.
We had a little problem downstairs. Brutus is dead. He got hit with the piano.
Where's the boy?
With the mother. Locked up in the pantry.
Oh, it's time for us to go.
His reaction is priceless. I love it. But I do like Lex Luthor's evil plan for this movie involving Superman's crystals that he stole from the Fortress of Solitude, to the point where he does have his own version later in the movie. But as a kid, I really didn't understand why Superman couldn't fight back when Lex Luthor's goons were basically kicking his ass. But it wasn't until I got older and realized that the reason Superman wasn't able to fight back against Lex Luthor's goons was because that island he was on was infused with kryptonite. Now, I don't know if I cried first time watching the scene, but I know how much it broke me seeing Superman get beat up like this. And years later, rewatching this movie, it still hurts me to watch this scene. I almost want to cry because of it as I looked up to Superman as a kid. He became my favorite superhero from DC Comics. I love Superman so much because of this movie itself. Another thing I will say is, as a kid, I honestly thought he died in this movie, but little did I know that I would end up seeing the death of Superman for reals 10 years later in Batman vs. Superman. So let's hope I don't have to watch Superman die on screen once again for the DCU. Because I don't need to go through that shit again, please and thank you. Unless James Gunn can adapt this storyline well, since the DCEU totally rushed it in its second film, but I still stand with what I said. I don't want to see Superman die on screen again. But back to topic. I really like certain storylines or certain character arcs in this film, especially with Lois Lane and Clark Kent. There's a lot of scenes I do love in this movie, but my favorite obviously has to go with when he's saving everyone on an airplane. But my biggest praise I have for this movie is the score, because oh my god, I fell in love with the music for this movie. And don't even get me started on the damn theme song, because it is my most favorite Superman theme song. John Ottman, if I pronounce your name correctly, you absolutely cooked with this one, especially using John Williams' Superman theme. Superman theme song for Superman. It'll always forever be iconic. I'll admit, as a kid, when I watched a fan-made YouTube video that had The Dark Knight, a Wonder Woman, and Brandon Routh's Superman fight off against the 2008's Incredible Hulk, but was fan-edited into Doomsday, I would have liked to have seen this version of Superman share the screen with Christian Bale's Batman, as 2 years later, after Superman Returns, we would then get Batman Begins, directed by Christopher Nolan. But since this movie is supposed to be set in the Christopher Reeve Superman universe, it's honestly such a shame, but a huge missed opportunity that we didn't get a world's finest movie with Michael Keaton's Batman and freaking Christopher Reeve's Superman. We should have gotten that instead of Superman 3 and 4. At least that movie would have been better than those two stinkers.
Also, here's something I totally forgot to bring up about, and it has to do with Superman's suit for this movie. One minor nitpick, actually make that two. One, for starters, the color for the red sadly doesn't look great, as it looks like it has a more brownish color. As my second nitpick, he doesn't have the yellow logo on the back of the cape. I always like seeing that. Not sure if I would have this at number 1 because I would like it if they fixed the red color on the suit, but also add the yellow logo on the back of the cape. You do that, boom, this suit would be at number 1 in my ranking list. But as for the logo, I'll say this, it took me a while to get used to the Henry Cavill Superman logo, and as for David Cornsweet's Superman logo, I don't want to say that's worse. I do dig it, but that's gonna also take some time to get used to. I'll forever consider the classic logo as my favorite, but for this one, I would probably put it at number 1 for me. It's not a bad looking Superman logo. But anyways, back to the end of the review.
But overall, what more can I say? I loved this film when I was a kid. It's one of my childhood favorites, and to this day, I still love this movie. So Superman Returns will forever hold a special place in my heart because it's the movie that introduced me to Superman. It's what made me become a fan of Superman. For now, I'm gonna say my rating is between a 9 or a 10 out of 10 because I'm shocked I had a changed opinion on this as I last watched it 7 months ago with having some minor criticisms on the film. Plus, for all I know, the next time I watch this movie, my rating could change, but it doesn't matter because either way, I'll forever love this movie to death till the end of time.
One last thing I will say about Superman Returns, I think that this is a great tribute to Christopher Reeve's Superman. Also, I am aware that Brandon Routh does return as Superman in Crisis on Infinite Earths on CW. I am glad he returned to the role, but also, I have yet to catch up with the CW Arrowverse shows, as I'm still stuck on The Flash, which I think I'm supposed to start watching Arrow first before I go on to The Flash. Oh, God. How many shows are there in the Arrowverse? Because I know the DC era ended on CW with Superman and Lois last year, as that's also another show I need to catch up watching, specifically with the last 2 seasons.
So with that being said, those are just my thoughts with Superman Returns, and oh, look at that, 20 minutes. That's better than how I originally filmed this video, which was 40 minutes long. But once I edit this video, it'll be cut short to maybe 15, 16 minutes long. But we shall see. I hope you guys enjoyed my review on Superman Returns, along with my review series on the Superman films. But be sure to let me know your thoughts comments down below on Superman Returns that will soon be 20 years old, come by next year in June 30th.
Also, another thing I forgot to mention about, only this time not have to do with Superman Returns, but if I had seen Superman in theaters or not. And most of y'all voted yes that I did get to see the movie, and I wanted to have my Superman Returns review out first, and then my out-of-theater reaction. But then I decided, screw it, I'll just post my out-of-theater reaction and then work on my review for Superman Returns. But definitely stay tuned for my movie vlog on Superman, as I'm going to try to get extra footage to make it at least a lot more entertaining. You'll probably see it either Thursday or Friday. But for now, stay tuned for a hype trailer that I'm going to need to work on right after I edit this video, which is going to take me all night.
As always, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.